Looks like the two players are jumping into team preview now.
Okay, I just opened it.
Awesome. So yeah, like we said, Marco with the Mimikyu, Incineroar, Calyrex, Urshifu Dark, Tapu Fini, and Regieleki versus FedeCampo Zacian, Clefairy, Colossal, Urshifu, Water, and Rillaboom and Moltres. So interesting matchup here. We'll see how both players choose to approach it.
I like the Mimikyu here into a team like this Colossal team, mostly because it's not something that can just get like deleted by Colossal right off the bat. Like if Marco wants to get Trick Room up, like he will. I'm not sure if there are ways that Fede has to stop it other than flinching with something. I don't know if there are any flinching moves here, but just off the top of my head, I guess Fiery Wrath. You go for Fiery Wrath and pray. But yeah.
There's definitely ways for Fede to commit to beating the Mimikyu lead. However, most of them don't involve setting up the Colossal immediately, so that in itself is pretty disruptive for the Mimikyu to be on the team for Marco. So we'll probably see some sort of lead with that. As we see the Zacian and the Moltres lead from Fede, as well as Incineroar and Mimikyu leading from Marco's side. So what do you think might transpire this turn, Jake?
But yeah, this is something that you can, like you said, I like this as kind of a lead you can dedicate to beating Mimikyu, because Mimikyu doesn't really want to be facing down the Zacian. The Moltres has, I believe it has Taunt, like we saw in its team sheet. Although the Mimikyu is Mental Herb as well, so it's kind of a trade-off there. But I like the lead from Marco here, just because it gives him options to get Trick Room up immediately if he wants to. That seems like one of his best ways of beating the Colossal, so it makes sense. But the Zacian and the Moltres, threatened by a couple super effective moves, like a Play Rough, Froller Blitz, but they're bulky enough to each stomach one, so there's a lot of leeway here for FedeCampo.
And right off the bat, we see the Zacian set up the Substitute. No fake out from the Incineroar, interestingly enough. While the Moltres goes for an Air Slash into the Mimikyu, maximizing those flinch chances, going for the 30% Air Slash flinch instead of the Fire Wrath's 20. As Incineroar goes for a Parting Shot through the Substitute. We learned last match, a sound move, Parting Shot goes through Substitutes, and switches right out into his insanely bulky Calyrex, his Assault Vest item. Obviously not going to be taking a hit this turn, but comes in unscathed, and Trick Room outside of a flinch will be going up here. Really getting my tongue waiting, and the Mimikyu does get the Trick Room up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so that's an important non-flinch there. The Trick Room does go up for the Calyrex, but still the Calyrex not in a super great spot. The Zacian is at -1 from that Parting Shot, but if the Calyrex opts to Dynamax and try to target the Moltres, it still won't be wanting to take Behemoth Blade. Even if it doesn't, Glacial Lance will be pretty strong. Probably break the sub of the Zacian. Still not in, the Zacian's going to be able to fire off Behemoth Blade this turn, which, even though Calyrex is pretty bulky, it's not going to want to be eating that.
We see the Mimikyu switch out to the Incineroar, fearing perhaps a Behemoth Blade, as you mentioned from that Zacian. The Incineroar's Intimidate falls on deaf ears on that Substitute. Intimidates the Moltres, probably not going to be super relevant, as that Moltres gets out of here for the Clefairy, really augmenting Zacian's incredible bulk. Might even enable it to live a Glacial Lance through the Substitute. Might not break the Substitute, rather, as Calyrex does in fact go for the Glacial Lance, does a hefty chunk to that Clefairy.
That does so much.
And does not break the Zacian Substitute.
Yeah.
That's really important, because unable to Flare Blitz it next turn, as the Behemoth Blade goes off into the Calyrex, does a hair over 50%, but enough to be in the money for this next turn, really.
Yeah, that was a massive, you calling out the sub not breaking is huge there, because now, if Zacian didn't have a sub up and Marco went for another Glacial Lance and something like a Flare Blitz, probably would have been able to knock out the Zacian and through the Friend Guard. But in this turn, if Fede, for example, wanted to protect the Clefairy, make sure the Friend Guard stayed intact, and break the sub with another Glacial Lance, which should do the trick. I would be very surprised if a Flare Blitz was able to KO Zacian from here with that Friend Guard boost. So that really provides another turn for Zacian to click Behemoth Blade. If it does Behemoth Blade the Calyrex again, it should be able to take a knockout based on the damage from the first one, which is massive for Fede, because that would be a restricted Pokemon from Marco down. without doing a whole lot of damage.
But the Clefairy protects itself from, the knockout from the Glacial Lance, as Calyrex does go for that. Most likely going to be breaking this substitute on the Zacian. And we saw on our side, but Incineroar using and abusing that parting shot, really trying to whittle down this Zacian's offensive output, but not really taking the hit on it. Most likely wouldn't have been able to knock it out with a Flare Blitz through Friend Guard. But yeah, parting shot. I believe that Zacian's now at -2 attack stat. A far cry from its original +1, but out into the Tapu Fini, gets it in the Incineroar slot.
That's another good turn. Just because this Behemoth Blade should be able to do a big chunk to the Calyrex. Because of that parting shot, won't be enough to take the knockout this time around, but it's still really low. And with the Clefairy on the field, if the Tapu Fini does have something like a Heal Pulse, he won't be able to Heal Pulse the Calyrex just because Follow Me will immediately. Well, no, I guess. Do you think Glacial Lance would knock out Clefairy? That's the only thing it's taken, right? So yeah, it should.
It definitely will knock out the Clefairy. We might, we could potentially see Clefairy go for a double protect or a life do, which is interesting on this Clefairy, but we do see the switch out. Yeah, there is the life do.
Yeah.
But we see the Zacian playing it safe, switches out to the Urshifu Surging Strike. As Clefairy heals up, that might be outside of Glacial Lance range.
Very close. Yeah.
We'll have to see. As the Calyrex, third turn in a row goes for the Glacial Lance. Oh, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And Clefairy does in fact live, and the Tapu Fini goes for a Calm Mind. So, Fede doing a great job of stalling out the Trick Room without losing any Pokemon to it. And on this last turn, he can pretty safely double protect, which would force Fede or Marco to have to Dynamax to take a knockout. But yeah, pretty expertly navigated out of Trick Room. However, Tapu Fini, the +1/+1s from Calm Mind could be pretty dangerous here.
Yeah, this Tapu Fini looks like it's in a pretty great spot here. The Moltres and the Urshifu really not great into Tapu Fini. Clefairy not going to be doing any damage at all. The only thing that Tapu Fini has to worry about is the Zacian that's in the back. And with the Incineroar still intact on Marco's side, the Tapu Fini looks like it's set up pretty well here. The Glacial Lance last turn, nice because it puts the Clefairy in range of getting knocked out here. If it does opt to protect, then it will be knocked out for the Fini next turn. But we're going for the Dynamax with his very low health Calyrex there, it looks like.
Yeah, we do see, even on the last turn of Trick Room, Marco prioritizing getting that last bit of damage off with the Calyrex, and it will be the last bit. Really anything that Fede decides to graze the Calyrex with will knock it out, so interesting call. We don't see any protects on this side from Fede. Goes for a Life Dew on Clefairy, healing itself back up to around 35% as the Urshifu gets back to full and does, well, just a hair shy, but we see the Steel Spike come off from the Calyrex, which does an okay amount of damage to the Urshifu, but not the type of damage we're used to seeing from a Calyrex, as it raises the defense stat of the Calyrex and the Tapu Fini. The latter probably being more important for this battle, as Tapu Fini goes for a Calm Mind and takes out the Urshifu. So Life Dew ultimately for not this turn from Clefairy.
Yeah, Dynamax on the Dynamax on a 13 health Calyrex might seem a bit strange, but I actually really liked that play because the max Steel Spike is now put this Tapu Fini at +1 defense, and considering that the Zacian is really the best way that Fede has to damage Tapu Fini now, it'll be, taking those attacks at +1 defense. The Clefairy and the Moltres won't be able to do much to the Tapu Fini at all. So Marco's put himself in a pretty good position here to start dealing a lot of damage with this Tapu Fini.
I definitely agree. It was a pretty creative Dynamax there on the Calyrex, and now we're seeing perhaps less of a creative Dynamax on Fede's. It's relative. Can't really say. It's a bit of subjective statement, but we see the Moltres Dynamax and go for a Max Darkness into Calyrex Ice form, knocking that out. Might have been a tight knockout. It's hard to say. Might have been a roll there, but knocks out the Calyrex and puts the Tapu Fini down to neutral special defense stat, which could be important for some later game shenanigans. That exchange between the Moltres and the Tapu Fini could realistically be how this game ends up coming to. The Clefairy gets knocked out by the Tapu Fini's +1 special attack Moonblast.
Like that Max Darkness, like you said, it returns the Fini to neutral special defense, which might allow the Moltres to fire off some Max Airstreams its way. The Moonblast into Clefairy I think was important there because now Friend Guard is off the table, Life Dew is also off the table, and I liked not targeting the Moltres there because a lot of them do carry a weakness policy, which could have been popped by that Moonblast. And although actually we have team sheets, it's Goggles, so I guess that wasn't an issue. But getting the Friend Guard out of the way is great because now the Zacian won't be able to take advantage of that Friend Guard, nor will it be able to take advantage of Life Dew, which I think are some of the ways that Fede could have kept the Zacian healthy and able to take on the Tapu Fini.
Yeah, I liked Marco's decision to bring in Incineroar rather than Mimikyu here. No Zacian's popping, it's going to show its ugly mug here, so you can immediately get that Intimidate off, apply Fake Out Pressure, or just Parting Shot, switch around, whatever he wants. But getting this Zacian down to lower HP will be important for him, and also lower attack stat. This Fini will be Marco's defensive and offensive, really, way of winning this game. As we see him protecting that Tapu Fini, really going on the defensive with Fini this turn.
Yeah, I think that's really smart.
Oh, and we see the Airstream and the Behemoth Blade target into the protecting Fini. Really excellent turn for Marco. Takes really little damage, and we're going to see his leftovers item heal a lot of that back this turn. We see the Incineroar go on the offensive, Flare Blitz the Zacian, taking the knockout and ultimately probably spelling victory for Marco. It's going to be tough for Moltres to handle this Tapu Fini, even at neutral special defense stat.
Yeah, it's got to handle the Tapu Fini and the Mimikyu in the back, and the Incineroar currently on the field. And even though Moltres is a pretty good Pokemon, I really don't think it's got enough to handle 3 at once. That's a really smart turn from Marco. Targeting the Zacian with Flare Blitz means that if it opts to substitute this turn, it certainly won't end the turn with a substitute. If the Zacian does decide to try to take out the Tapu Fini, like we just saw happen, then the Zacian just gets knocked out straight up. So smart turn protecting the kind of the checkmate piece in that Tapu Fini, and ensuring that he's able to take this first game.
And Fede knows when his victory is, there's no shot at victory anymore. Cancels immediately, doesn't really want to reveal anything about his bulk, doesn't want his opponent to gain any inkling of an idea about his EV spread, how well he can take Moonblast in the future, etc. So just cancels, and we get set up for game 2. So Jake, obviously Marco seemed pretty in control a lot of that game, especially getting Trick Room up.
Right.
Fede had to, he essentially gambled on an air/flinch turn 1 to stop Trick Room from going up. Do you have any idea how he might be able to more consistently answer Trick Room in this next game?
I don't know if there's a way for him to answer it in the sense that he has to rely on a flinch to prevent it from going up. I guess his answers to it have to be more like mitigating anything from happening as Trick Room is up. And with the Calyrex being so slow, I don't know if there's many options to kind of keep it at bay. Like there's no Intimidate on Fede's side of the field, so we can't drop its attack. Calyrex has such good coverage that it's able to hit pretty much anything for at least neutral damage, if not super effective. And you have to worry about Glacial Lance being an incredibly strong spread move. If it takes 1 attack, it starts snowballing with as 1 and an attack boost. It's really difficult there. The Tapu Fini was really what kind of ended the game for Marco there, and if you want to have a better check to that, you could try to possibly bring the Rillaboom, but then you risk being even weaker to the Calyrex, which is difficult. So it's kind of tough here. If you're Fede, you kind of have to think, what are the ways that I can keep this Calyrex from doing a lot of damage in Trick Room and setting up something like the Tapu Fini for an end game. And I think the Clefairy is a good way to do that. The Life Dew and the Friend Guard putting in a lot of work there. We saw that it was able to take 2 Glacial Lances with a Life Dew in between. So maybe he can try to play to that a little bit more, but it's going to be difficult, I think.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing a switch off of Moltres. Didn't seem too effective for him in that last game, but
yeah,
he's got different things in mind, leading the Moltresization once again into Mimikyu and Incineroar. Neither player's changing it up this time around. Interesting call from Fede. Maybe a variation in the back Pokemon, or how he's going to play this turn 1 is how he's hoping to change the result of that game 1 into his favor in game 2.
Right. I agree. I think the Moltres Spring could have been something different, especially considering the Calyrex and the Tapu Fini both have ways to deal a lot of damage to Moltres. On the other hand, though, the Moltres is one of the things that could do a lot of damage to the Calyrex. They're kind of trading off as far as those go. So it might be one way he has in mind. Maybe get the Moltres in and you can Trick Room earlier into the Calyrex, possibly match Dynamaxes, go for some Max Darknesses, but pretty similar turn 1. We get the substitute right off the bat instead, though.
Yeah, pretty passive turn 1 as Zacian goes for a substitute as Incineroar fakes out the Moltres, doesn't want to risk a flinch this time around, and Trick Room goes up without Disguise being broken this time. And Incineroar, Zacian goes for a Protect behind substitute, doesn't want to take a parting shot like previous game, wants to keep that attack as neutral as it can, but Marco going for a Flare Blitz this time, prioritizing breaking the sub, and going for a Play Rough, doing hefty damage to that Moltres, but activating its Berserk ability, which will activate a special attack raise, and a pretty hefty Fiery Wrath, doing not so hefty damage onto Incineroar, and doing obviously no damage to the Mimikyu, but breaking its Disguise.
I think this game has already started out a lot better for Fede. There have been, Trick Room has gone up, and there's been one turn passed, and the Calyrex still isn't on the field. And so, if Marco wants to get Calyrex in the field soon, it can have at most 2 turns of Trick Room to work with. If he wants to try to eliminate this Zacian sooner than that, he doesn't have a whole lot of ways to do that without kind of Flare Blitzing this turn and the next to break the sub and then damage. So I think that Fede's already done a better job of kind of managing Trick Room here.
As Moltres gets out of there, doesn't want to take a Play Rough into the Clefairy slot, as Marco goes for a Flare Blitz to break the Zacian sub, and a Will-O-Wisp, which he misses onto the Zacian, which is really unfortunate. A strong read, probably would have really set him up this game, because Zacian the main answer against the Calyrex. However, almost wasting that stroke of luck as the Behemoth Blade strikes into the Incineroar, probably predicting a Calyrex switch, but obviously not exactly what he was looking for this turn, but obviously a lot better than it could have been had that Will-O-Wisp struck.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if you're Marco there, you're fortunate that he went for the Behemoth Blade into the Incineroar instead of the Mimikyu, because that miss on the Will-O-Wisp was a bit unfortunate, but kind of predicting that switch in the Calyrex there, like you said.
And the Clefairy Redirects doesn't want to take a Will-O-Wisp on that Zacian, obviously. We see a Flare Blitz into the Clefairy and a Taunt. Marco, obviously sees the Follow Me coming, doesn't want to deal with that. And in subsequent turns, as Zacian goes for another sub, so a really passive turn this time around, but I think intelligently played by both players. Doesn't want to give the free switch into Calyrex just yet, so Fede just goes for the substitute instead of an attacking move and taking a knockout.
The good thing for Fede here is that this is the last turn of Trick Room, so if you're able to Behemoth Blade this Mimikyu, if you get burned, you might not knock it out, but you at least put it in range where pretty much anything else should be able to knock it out before Trick Room goes back up, which makes the Calyrex a lot less scary. Just still a very threatening Pokemon, even outside of Trick Room, just because it is so bulky. It'll be able to take a couple attacks and use some Glacial Lights as their max moves, but it's a lot easier to manage when you don't have Trick Room out.
As the Clefairy switches out into the Urshifu, doesn't particularly feel useful on the field, having been taunted. As another switch from Mimikyu into the Tapu Fini. So 2 water types suddenly on the field. It's getting wet and wild out here on the battlefield. And we'll see what the Incineroar goes for. We see the Zacian go for a Protect behind the sub once again. Really effective way of stalling out Trick Rooms is this substitute Zacian, as we've seen. But Marco doesn't really fall for that. Parting shots, the Clefairy slot, which is now the Urshifu, and gets a free switch in on this final turn of Trick Room into the Mimikyu or the Calyrex. We'll see. He seems to be mulling it over. We'll see what he goes with.
That's a really smart parting shot, just because you can, on the last turn of Trick Room with Protect available, it's pretty good bet that the Zacian will be able to go for Protect there. So he's able to parting shot the Urshifu, put it at -1 attack. Unfortunately, the Surging Strike is going to make that not as useful, just because it will always get that critical hit. But now he is able to get the Mimikyu in, and if he wants to gamble that he's able to survive an attack or two and go for Trick Room, that might be his best bet here. The Urshifu is going to be putting out a lot of pressure, even with the Tapu Fini on the field here, because that Surging Strikes is going to be able to smack the partner.
and we see a interesting Dynamax. We don't see it too often, but we see the Urshifu surging strikes going for the Gigantamax. So we'll be able to break through any max guards should Marco choose to go for that. And the Zacian going for a Behemoth Blade. Most likely in the Mimikyu, just trying to halt any opportunities for Trick Room to go up again. But nope, it looks like it's into the Tapu Fini, doing 100 HP, or a big amount of damage. But we're gonna see the G-Max Rapid Flow. Interesting call into the Mimikyu, not even getting close to taking a knockout after that parting shot. We see Tapu Fini go for a Muddy Water. Wow. And Mimikyu almost certainly getting Trick Room up here, right?
You would think so, yeah. The accuracy drop on Urshifu will be nice in a couple turns after the Gigantamax ends. Muddy Water notably not breaking the substitute on Zacian, though, so that's kind of a big turn for Fede there as far as the substitute goes, staying intact. But I'm curious as to why the Urshifu opted to Gigantamax there. At -1 attack from that parting shot, I don't think there was any chance the G-Max Rapid Flow would knock out the Mimikyu. And even if you wanted to target the Mimikyu, I think Surging Strikes might have been the better option, just to make sure you're getting a little bit more damage off with those crits. Opting not to Behemoth Blade the Mimikyu also lets Trick Room go up again, and that's kind of the end that Marco needed. He still has his Calyrex at full health, and he should be able to get it on the field without a whole lot of trouble here. Because if Mimikyu takes one attack from either of these Pokemon, it's probably getting knocked out.
Yeah, really interesting play. We see the Tapu Fini being played defensively once again. Goes for a Protect as Mimikyu breaks Zacian's substitute with a Play Rough. And Urshifu goes for that G-Max Rapid Flow, finally knocking out the Mimikyu. Perhaps a turn too late, though. And Zacian goes for a Behemoth Blade. This time doesn't get it right, doesn't get that substitute back up to stall subsequent turns of Trick Room. And finally, Marco should be able to get that free switch in Trick Room into his Calyrex that he's been looking for.
Yeah, so now that Calyrex comes in, it's facing the G-Max Urshifu, which is at -1 attack, won't be able to do a whole lot of damage to it. Zacian is low enough that if he is carrying Max Quake, which I believe he does, that should be a pretty clean knockout. He does still have to worry about the Moltres in the back. If Fede is able to kind of catch Max Quakes with that Moltres, that would kind of be his way to stall out Trick Room here. But if the Moltres comes in, it still has to worry about something like a Max Hailstorm or just a full-on Glacial Lance. It's certainly not sealed up for Marco yet, but this is a very solid position for him with Trick Room. And a Dynamax still active with his full health Calyrex.
Yeah, the Urshifu feeling pressured here, gets out, doesn't use this last turn in Dynamax, switches out into the Clefairy. And as you said, the Calyrex really threatening a lot of damage here. He could have fallen for this Max Quake into the Calyrex or into the Zacian, but as we saw from Marco's targeting, intelligently realized, you know what, a Moonblast plus a Max Steel Spike will probably knock out the Zacian, regardless of what happens this turn. Unless they protect, of course. But that defense phase, regardless, is going to be really important for me. So goes for the Max Steel Spike, which at this low of HP, that Play Rough from earlier in the game probably knocks that Moltres into the range. And we'll see if it does take the knockout.
That's
almost certainly
be.
Will, yeah. So now gets the Chilling Neigh attack boost and the defense boost on Tapu Fini as well as the Calyrex. So it's going to be a pretty tough ask, especially with Incineroar on the back against this all-physical attacking roster on Fede's side. It's going to be really, really incredibly difficult to outlast this Calyrex during the remaining turns of Trick Room.
I mean, just a really smart play from Marco there, like you said, noticing that a Max Steel Spike and a Moonblast would certainly be able to knock out the Zacian, and a coverage for the Moltres coming in trying to catch a Max Quake. Now this Calyrex is sitting at +1 attack and +1 defense against a team that only has physical attackers left, like you said. So pretty good spot here. That Intrepid Sword boost will mean the Zacian's at +1. The Incineroar will be able to kind of neutralize that. But with the +1 defense boost, I would be hard-pressed to think that the Calyrex wouldn't survive at least one Behemoth Blade, especially if it opts to go for another Max Steel Spike like we're about to see.
Oh, and we see the Clefairy going for a helping hand, trying to bolster that Zacian's offense just in case it doesn't get targeted, which it does not. Oh, goodness. Okay. So the Calyrex boosts up to +2 defense. The Zacian at +1 plus a helping hand boost. It's gonna be tight, but a Behemoth Blade, if there's no Muddy Water drop here, I don't actually recall what the Tapu Fini went for, but it's gonna be a tight call here, I'd say. And Moonblast probably, not doing amazing damage, but more importantly, not getting a Muddy Water drop in any reality when you go for Moonblast now. As for the Behemoth Blade, is it gonna knock out?
I think it'll be close. Like, Zacian does stupid amounts of damage, but I think Calyrex is bulky enough.
Oh, 18 HP.
Wow. 18
so close.
HP. I mean, it's so close, and it's unfortunate for Fede that it wasn't a full knockout, but if this Urshifu is carrying Aqua Jet, that could be enough to take the knockout. The annoying thing is I think there's a universe where a Calyrex survives an Aqua Jet, especially if the Incineroar switches in, just because the Calyrex is so bulky and at +2 and Dynamax. But either way, I think this is still a very strong position for Marco because the Tapu Fini also has defense boost now. So if he just wants to leave the Fini in, I'll possibly go for a Moonblast into a Shifu. That should be able to knock it out. And I don't think that Fede has enough resources to win this game here, so I think he realized that as well.
Yeah, and Fede just calls it. Doesn't even go for the Aqua Jet roll, whether it had to be a crit or not. Says, I probably can't beat Fini and Incineroar with my remaining Pokemon, even if I do knock out this Calyrex. So calls it early, and Marco takes another 2-0 in this cut to move on to the finals of the Battle Room Brawl Trace.